Hi all, welcome to the new session of Azure Data Factory, and in this session we are going to look at mapping tab of copy activity. So let's go into our Data Factory studio. Let me log into my Azure portal. So this is going to be the last session of the copy activity because the other two sessions, other two tabs that we can look are not mostly changed. So they are going to be set as default. They are going to be as it is for most of the pipelines, but still I will explain what those two tabs actually do in this session only. Okay, so here we are in our Azure Data Factory. Let me jump onto my pipeline. So this pipeline has only one copy activity, copy customer data. So we saw general, source, sync tab. So most of the time when you are working in Azure Data Factory and you are using copy activity, most of the time you will be working with these three tabs only. Mapping is going to be used to configure certain very basic transformations on column level. So when I say certain transformations on column level, it means that suppose you are copying your data from a table of Azure SQL database, and that data is of suppose date type, and you want it to store it in string type, but the format of date you want to change. So all those kind of use cases you can handle in the mapping section. So type conversion setting, if you see, so you have allow data truncation, treat boolean as number, date format, what should be the default date format, what should be the date time format, date time offset format, timestamp format, culture. So culture is like what culture you want to put. So when you are working with US time, US date, then it will always be like month, day, and year. Whereas if you are working in Indian setting, so the Indian dates are typically day, month, and year. So similarly, you can have different cultures, and based on that, the format of certain data types will vary. Okay. Now, in order to look into this, we will do a small provisioning. But before that, let me just go into setting and explain you this as well. So maximum data integration unit is the actual measurement based on which you will be charged in your Azure Data Factory for copying the data. So if you see, you will be charged around 25 cents per DIU hour. Okay. And this is going to be automatic right now, but you can choose if you want. So most of the time you keep it as auto because Data Factory is smart enough, based on your workload it will decide what is the best value for this. Okay. Degree of parallelism, again it's like when you are copying data from a source to sync, what kind of parallelism you want. That means how many concurrent connections you want to create towards your uh, how many concurrent connection you want to create to your data source so that your data can be copied quickly. But again you keep it as auto, you don't change it, other than the cases where you actually have a restriction that you cannot create more than these many connections on a particular database or a table, you don't touch it. Data consistency verification is a basic check, like how many records have been copied from source and sync. So it will check those consistency, it will perform those consistency check, like the number of records from source to number of records in sync should be same. Fault tolerance, again it's one of the features that you have. So it's like skip incompatible row, select all, something like that. Okay. So these are the things which you mostly don't do in normal use cases, but yeah, if you want to look in further and if you want to perform some enhancements on your copy activity, this is the place to go. Okay. And in the user properties you can generate the user properties. It's like tags. If you are provisioning a resource, you give tags, so you will have a key and you will have a value. These things will be visible to you in the monitoring section, and based on these things you can further analyze your pipeline execution. So settings and user properties are very very specific to a certain use cases. Well, to a certain use case, you don't do it for all of the data factories. Most of the time it these two tabs are kept untouched. Okay. So this is a small discussion that we did for these two tabs. I'm not going to explain all these because most of these things are self-explanatory, and you can just take the data set that I have provided and use that data set to perform some experiments, and you will be able to figure out most of the things. Okay, now let's go to our mapping section. So in the mapping section, what we are going to do, we are going to create a database first. And remember that mapping section is mostly used with the databases. So we are going to go into our resource group. Let me go back to resource group, and we are going to create a database. So let me use Azure SQL. I'm going to apply this offer. We will have the database. I'm going to say it's sales DB, and I have to create a new server. Bishop SQL Server Demo. Going to provision it into Central India. I'm going to use SQL authentication for simplicity. So sales DB admin. Okay, so I'm going to create. Let me just copy this at one particular location so that I don't forget the name. Fine. So I have our SQL server ready. I have our database name ready. Auto pause should be enabled. After that, continuing use. Okay, I don't want this. I want this option. So when my free offer gets consumed, it will pause the database so that I am not charged for anything. I'm going to use public endpoint. I'm going to use allow Azure services. I'm going to use add current client IP address. Okay, I will keep everything as it is. Now for security, I'm not going to touch anything here as well. I'm going to say additional settings. Here I'm going to choose. Let's keep none for now. Let's keep it blank because we have a SQL script that we are going to use. Now go to tags, go to review and create. So as you can see, as of now, we are not going to be charged for anything. That's good. Let me click on create. Okay. So I'm going to pause this video for now. We will be back once the deployment is successful. Now our deployment is successful. Let me go to our database. I'm going to go into my query editor. Everything is pre-populated. So let me click, and we are now into our database. So currently, if you see, I don't have any tables in our database. So what I have done, I have created a small SQL script that we are going to use for this demo. So I'm going to use that SQL script to give you an idea of how we can use mapping tab in our copy activity. So here I'm going to create a source table that is called as student source, and in this we have student name, ID, batch, stream, when the record was inserted and when the record was updated. Okay, so let me just copy paste it into our query editor. Uh, Let me copy and paste it into our query editor, and let me run it. Okay, now I have executed it. So let me just do select star from student source. Okay, so as you can see, I don't have any records in it, so it says query succeeded, affected row 0. Now I'm going to insert these records. So you have a very nice feature in our SQL server, whereas if you want to insert, let's suppose, multiple records using one insert statement, you can just put comma at the end of each row, and just before the last row you have to put a semicolon. So it is going to insert each and every row, and it is going to populate into our table in one go. Like in Oracle, I don't know whether they have implemented this or not. I was working with Oracle long back, 6 7 years ago. So we had to do this individually. There was no such concept of comma. So let me go and just copy paste this here. I'm going to say run. So as you can see, affected rows 6. Affected rows basically means how many records were processed. So right now, if you see, it says you have 6 records. Okay. So let me again do select star on my table. Select star from student source. Now, as you can see, you have the data. Okay. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to copy this data. Everything will be same. So suppose this use case is like you have a school, and in that school you have administration department that maintains all this information, that who is going to be, who is studying, in which stream they are, which batch they are from. So all these kind of things is managed by the administration department. But there is a separate database for library, because library is open to people outside of the school. So they are keeping their separate database, but they want this data as well. Okay. So that case, you have in that library database a sync use table called users, and in that you have a column insert date and update date, like two columns, but here instead of having the date values, you have strings. Okay. Now they want the date to be stored in a separate format, like a different format. Okay. Now if you want to do this, you can use mapping. Okay, so let me just use this, and I'm going to put it into our query editor. So I'm going to create this table as a library table. Okay, so the first table is going to be your administration table where the students records are being kept, and this is going to be our library table. Okay, now let me create this. Select users to. Okay, let me just quickly run a select star on it. Select star from. Let me remove it. Let me run. Okay, so as you can see, now we have our table that is going to be used as sync in our data factory, but we don't have any data in it. Okay, now we are going to populate this table. So let me go back to my data factory, and here what we have to do is we have to go into our copy data activity, and we have to change our source and sync. So in this case, our source is going to be of SQL type. So let me go into Azure, and I'm going to use Azure SQL. Okay, so I'm going to say data set Azure SQL student source, and I have to create a new link service as well for this. Link service Azure SQL. Auto resolve integration runtime I'm going to choose my subscription. It is automatically going to give me the server name and the database name. Now in the SQL authentication, I'm going to choose my username, that is going to be my sales db admin. And for the password, let me type it one more time. Most of the time it is auto populated, but sometimes browser can populate a wrong password if you have tried multiple times. So let me just test the connection. Connection is successful. Let me create it. Okay, now the link service is ready. It is going to say you choose the table name. So this is the source data set, so I'm going to choose my source table, student source. Okay, import schema, use connection. So it is going to look into the database, and based on the database table, it is going to create the schema in our data set. Okay, I'm going to say okay. I'm not going to change anything here. Everything is going to be the same. For sync, again, I have to create a new data set. I can parameterize the source data set, but for sake of simplicity, I'm going to create a new one. I'm going to use Azure SQL. Again, DS Azure SQL sync table. Okay. ls Azure SQL products. Yeah, this one. This was the link service. Fine. Now I'm going to use our users to as our sink. Okay, fine. Okay, insert. Don't touch anything here. We are mostly focused on mapping section. So source and sink, we are not going to change anything. Okay, let me go to mapping. Here, what I am going to say, import schemas. Okay. Now, if you see, for some columns, it is not able to identify the connection. So Data Factory actually uses the names to match the columns in source and sink table. But for now, if you see, it is not able to match the columns because the names in the source and sink tables are different. So student ID, we are going to put it that way so that it is able to identify the matching columns. So I'm going to say student name here. Now here I'm going to say batch student stream. Okay. Now if you see the last two, insert date and update date, I have deliberately kept it as the same name in both the tables because here we have a inconsistency. We are using date in source but varchar in sync. Now again the requirement from the library team is that you have to put the data in string for the date column, but also the date format for the string should be different. Okay, so in this case, let's check what is the date format in our source. Okay, so here I have source as 2010-05-01. So it's like YYYY hyphen MM hyphen DD T HH MM SS and then the fraction of seconds. Okay, so I'm going to go into type conversion, and since it is the complete date time, if you click on this is the thing that we are getting. Okay, let me, let's just expand a little bit. Let's see what is the format. Yeah, so it is the date time format, not the offset. Fine. So I am now going to say I want month first, DD, that is day after that, and then Y. Okay, and I want everything else as it is. Means HH MM SS dot. Let's keep everything as it is here. FFF. So that means it is going to switch the position of year and month and will give the date time in this format in our sync. That is the ideal scenario. Okay. So let's validate. Everything looks good. Let's publish everything. Okay. Now let's go into our general and click on debug. Okay, before going into that, let me just delete this because we don't need this parameter. So I am deleting, I am publishing it again. After this session, I'm going to create one session in which, let me see, publishing error. Okay, validate. Yeah, so I was saying that after this session, I'm going to give you an idea about why we focus so much on copy activity, and why we looked in each and every tab. And after that, we will move ahead and we'll look into the other parts of our data factory. Okay, missing parameter definition, sync file path. Okay, Let me remove the data set also. I think the data set is creating problem. Okay, I think in user properties, yeah, this one. So this is where we are getting the issue. So I'm removing everything. Let me just put it one more time. Okay. Uh, Great. So now everything is published. Let me click on debug. Okay. So as you can see, the pipeline has executed and it has copied 6 rows into our sink. Okay. Now let's see here. So we have records in our source. Now let me put users 2. As you can see here, you have a different date format. Okay, so you have month first, then date, then year, and after that you have hour, minutes, seconds, and fractions. Okay, so these kind of changes, these are called simple transformations you can do using the copy activity. So most of the time, copy activity is used only for copying the data from sources to a common place called as data lake. Okay. So in all these 14 sessions, what I have tried to explain is what is copy activity, what are the different tabs in it, what tabs are important, what tabs are optional, what is the importance of each and every options in those tabs. Okay, now in the next session I'm going to explain why I have put so much emphasis on copy activity, so that we can have a clear picture on the next step. So thank you so much, and please remember that after you are done with your practice, just go back to your home. Okay, go to your data factory and just delete this server. The reason I want you to delete this server is that the 100,000 V cores per second limit that we have, we can utilize it on monthly basis. So every month that limit is going to be given to you. So if you have that limit with you, you can reuse whatever is left. So suppose you ran the database for 15 minutes, and after that you switched it off, you deleted the resource again. 2 3 days later in the same month, if you want to do that same practice activity again, you will not be charged by the Azure. So make sure you use this uh, offer judiciously. So let me just go and delete the resource from my end. So it will ask for the feedback. I no longer have use for this workload. Submit and continue. I'm just going to write my server name. So Rishabh SQL server demo. Delete. So just wait while the server is getting deleted. So while this is happening, let me go to my data factory presentation. So in this section, what we saw, how we can use mapping section to perform simple transformation on columns. So what we did, we perform a transformation from our source table to sink table, where we change the format while copying the data from source to sink. Okay, mapping section, again I have said, is optional, and so is the settings and the user properties section. I will say that for settings and user properties, use your data factory and perform some experiments, and you will be able to figure out how to tweak those options. So settings is most of the time not used that often. User properties are used in order to make sure that you have some additional information about your pipeline. So that is the whole picture. And in the next section, we are going to discuss why we put so much focus on the copy activity and what is the next step. Okay. So let me see. Yeah, so my server is now deleted. Let me refresh my data factory resource group. As you can see, there is no SQL server present. So now I'm not going to be charged for my SQL server workload. Again, with this, you will also lose your links link services because the SQL server is not available. So these link services will also not function properly. So I'm going to delete them. Okay, so you have to delete the data set first. So let me go and delete the data set. Or you can just keep it as it is because I'm going to use the same pipeline for future references. So right now, just only to give you so that you should not be surprised once you delete the resource from your data factory, that is your SQL server is deleted, your link services and your data sets will not work because there is no source or sink for your data set and link services. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So your data factory will not function now, it will fail. So thank you so much for joining me in this session. We will meet again in the next session and we will discuss further. Thank you.